Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AF. We're talking with Kevin Sorbo and producer David A.R. White about the new movie God's Not Dead, premieres this Friday night. And, you know, the angle I explored with them in that last number to call, by the way, 888-589-8840. If you'd like to jump in our conversation, join the program, 888-589-8840 is the number to call. So love to have you weigh in on anything we've been talking about today. But, you know, I was exploring with them the benefits of seeing that your college-bound student go see this movie. You got a student who's in college, go see this movie. But because of the nature of the plot dynamics, where you've got an atheist professor, you've got a young student who has the courage of his convictions to actually challenge the professor in class about what he's saying about God, it might be an opportunity if you've got a coworker or a friend who is an agnostic or an atheist. This might be an opportunity, someone that you've been concerned about, maybe somebody you have talked to about spiritual things. This might be an opportunity to invite him to go with you and then have a conversation about his reaction to what he sees after the movie is over. So it could be a great conversation starter and an opportunity to share your faith with someone that you've been talking to and maybe move the ball down the field a little bit. That's God's Not Dead, premieres this Friday night, March 21st. Rob, if we can, 888-589-8840 is the number to call. Let's grab clip number one. This is Bill Maher, and Jeff teased this in the audio intro. And here's part of a Bill Maher clip where he's talking about this new movie, Noah, has Russell Crowe in it. And here is Bill Maher's view of God. It's blasphemous, but this is his view of God. And I want to react to what Bill Maher says in this soundbite. Let's listen.
But get this, what the Christians who are now protesting this movie are upset about is that it doesn't take the biblical story literally enough. They're mad because this made-up story doesn't stay true to their made-up story. But the thing that's really disturbing about Noah isn't the silly. It's that it's immoral. It's about a psychotic mass murderer who gets away with it, and his name is God. Genesis says God was so angry with himself for screwing up when he made mankind so flawed that he sent the flood to kill everyone, men, women, children, babies. What kind of tyrant punishes everyone just to get back at the few he's mad at? I mean, besides Chris Christie.
So that's Bill Maher, rather, not Jon Stewart, Bill Maher. You know, the interesting thing about what Bill Maher says, he calls God a psychotic mass murderer who drowns babies. Now, the best way to look at this is if God is not the God who is revealed in the Bible, then Bill Maher is right. If God is not the God who is revealed in the Bible, then Bill Maher is right. He's a psychotic mass murderer who drowns babies. But remember, the picture that we are given of God in the scriptures is that he is the creator. He is the potter, and we are the clay. He is the judge of the living and the dead. He is the judge of all the earth. And as Abraham said to God, will not the judge of all the earth do what is right? Now, you know, the analogy I've used before, you know, because the story of the flood is God does wipe out everything. I mean, he destroys everything. Everything that had breath is destroyed by the waters of the flood. And the reason is because the evil of man, the intentions of his heart, was only evil all the time. So the point was God had nothing left to work with. God's heart was not to destroy. God's heart was to redeem. But he looked at the entire population of the planet, and he only found one man, and perhaps the members of his family, only one man who had a heart to respond to him, to work with him, to obey him, and that man's name was Noah. He alone, among all the men of his generation, was a man of integrity and righteousness. And so God says, look, I have one man left with whom I can work, only one man that does not merit destruction in the day of wrath and the day of judgment. So I'm going to work with him. I'm going to show him how to protect himself, how to shelter himself, how to shield himself from the judgment that is going to fall so that I can begin again with Noah and with his offspring. The analogy that I have used is, and I think it's a good one, is you have a thing of yogurt. You got a little container of yogurt. And yogurt is like just kind of mold and bacteria anyway, as I understand. I mean, I don't know what's actually in it, but I just know I don't like it and I don't eat it. But imagine you got yogurt or cottage cheese. Let's pick cottage cheese because, man, I find cottage cheese totally yuck to start with. But let's say you've got cottage cheese and you put a container of cottage cheese in the back of your refrigerator in your summer cabin. And the power goes out. Your refrigerator's out on the porch. Your power goes out. You don't know it, but your power goes out. And that refrigerator sits there baking in the heat of the summer for 6 months. And so you don't get back to it till early in the fall. You see the refrigerator sitting out on the porch. You go and open the door, and the stench would be overpowering. That would be emanating from that container of cottage cheese because it had gone bad. Now, what could you possibly do with that container of cottage cheese? There is nothing that you can do except to throw it away. You can't do anything with it but dump it out. There's nothing left to save. There's just nothing in there that you can work with, nothing to redeem, nothing to save, nothing that you can rescue out of that. It just has to be emptied out, and you've got to start all over. And that's the analogy that I think is appropriate for what happened with the flood. And remember, God says to Jeremiah in Jeremiah 18, he uses the analogy of the potter and the clay. Paul uses this analogy extensively in Romans chapter 9. And he says, look, God is like the potter, and we are like the clay. Now, a potter, when he works with clay, he can make that clay into anything that he wants. And the clay has no right, Paul says in Romans 9, to say to the potter, why did you make me like this? Because the potter is sovereign over the clay. And he can do with it. He has the right, the moral right, the ethical right to do with that clay whatever he chooses, whatever suits his purpose. If he wants to make some clay into this beautiful, expensive goblet, he can do that and ornament it with jewels. He can do that. If he wants to take another batch from the same clump of clay and he wants to turn that into a slop bucket, then God can do that. You know, and Paul's point is we have simply no right to challenge the Creator. And this is what Bill Maher does not understand. God is Bill Maher's creator. God created Bill Maher, and he gave him a free will. He gave all of the men of Noah's time free will. They were moral free agents. They could choose the right or they could choose wrong. They began to choose wrong. That pattern accelerated. They reinforced each other. There were no restraints. More and more boundaries were crossed, kind of like what we're seeing today in our culture, because God gave them the opportunity to exercise their free will, and he waited as long as he possibly could for man to begin to correct course and begin to move back toward the light instead of deeper into the darkness, and man simply would not do it. And so man, by his own free will, left God, the righteous judge, no choice at the end but to intervene with judgment. So Bill Maher has been created by God. God created Bill Maher. God gave Bill Maher freedom of choice. Bill Maher is a free moral agent. And so the decisions that Bill Maher is making right now to blaspheme God, to ridicule God, to mock God, he only has the ability to do that because God has given him that gift, the gift of free will, the gift of judgment, the gift of discernment, the gift of this enormously precious gift of being able to make decisions for our own lives. And so Bill Maher now is using that for profane and blasphemous purposes. And, you know, the only reason that Bill Maher, after a tirade like that, there is absolutely only one reason why Bill Maher draws another single breath, and that is because God is merciful. God is compassionate. He is abounding in steadfast love. and loving kindness. That's the only reason Bill Maher gets to draw another breath after saying those kind of things to the potter. Now, the reality is, we have to face the fact that's the only reason you and I get to take another breath. I mean, you and I, every single one of us have done things that merit God's judgment. There's not one of us that can point the finger of blame at Bill Maher and say we are morally superior to him, because we're not. All of us have done things, and we know it. We've all done things that deserve the judgment and the wrath of God. The only reason we can draw another breath is because God has been merciful and kind to us. And so what you're seeing now, why does God allow Bill Maher to go on these blasphemous rants? Because he is waiting for Bill Maher to come to the place of repentance. And he's continuing to extend to him his grace and his patience and his mercy. Now, eventually, the clock is going to run out for Bill Maher. It may be when he reaches the end of his life and he doesn't turn before he reaches the end of his life, then he's going to have to face God with those words, and he will be judged based on those words, because Jesus said, we will be judged by every careless word that comes out of our mouth. So, Bill Maher might have thought he was being hip and kind of trendy and kind of cool and all of that, but he's going to be judged for those careless words. God hopes it doesn't come to that. I mean, God could, by all rights, could take him right now, and Bill Maher would have to face judgment by the end of the day. Why doesn't God do that? Because he is patient with Bill Maher. He doesn't want to have to do that. He wants to give Bill Maher the time to come to his senses and to come to a place of repentance. The same extension of grace and mercy he grants to all of us. We'll be right back with your phone calls after the news. Don't go anywhere. Focal Point AFR Talk. Stay with us.